Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Enterprise AI Unlocked, the podcast where we explore how AI is reshaping the modern enterprise, one decision, one workflow, and one agent at a time. I'm your host, Paul Brzozowski, part of the founding team at Olakai, the enterprise AI analytics platform that helps organizations measure, govern, and scale their AI deployments. Today's episode is particularly exciting because we are talking with someone who sits at the intersection of AI innovation and enterprise reality. Helena Ristov has extensive experience helping establish AI innovation studios and Gen AI centers of excellence at firms like Protiviti and Capgemini, all with the intention of helping Fortune 500 companies figure out which AI investments are worth making before they commit millions to deployment. What makes Helena's perspective unique? She has a master's degree in mathematics from the University of Texas at Austin. She's architected production-grade AI platforms for Fortune 20 clients, and she's pioneered the development of Gen AI agent suites that balance innovation with data privacy and safety regulations. But Helena doesn't just advise on AI strategy. She builds prototypes, runs executive workshops, and works hands-on with clients to prioritize which initiatives deserve investment based on complexity, feasibility, and business value. So important in today's world. She's seen patterns across dozens of deployments about what separates successful AI programs from those that get stuck in pilot purgatory. And here's what really caught my attention. In our pre-call, Helena talked about the trust factor, how enterprises need AI they can actually trust to scale, how governance frameworks aren't constraints but foundations. We talked about this in the previous episodes with prior guests as well, and how the industry is shifting from assistive AI focused on efficiency to agentic AI that drives real productivity and ROI. In the true holiday spirits, Helena, welcome to Enterprise AI Unlocked.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for extending this invite to me to give you a little bit about my background and experience. I really do believe we sit at a pivotal moment where these discussions are shaping the industries and having lasting impacts all around. So I'm motivated to give my perspective into this collective pod. I think by having these open discussions will drive more ethical and grounded AI applications in the future.
Wonderful. It's great to have you here, Helena. I'm looking forward to this episode. And let me start with the fact that I really love that framing. And what I really mean by that is that we are at a pivotal moment and that open exchange matters. And that's exactly what I want to dig into today because you've been in those rooms where these decisions are actually being made. So let's start with the validation process itself at the very beginning of any AI process design. Helena, what I want to do is give the audience a little bit more understanding what happens in those early moments. You've worked with AI innovation studios and centers of excellence where the model is essentially pre-sales validation, gathering use cases, building reusable prototypes, figuring out what actually is worth pursuing before full implementation. Please walk us through what that process looks like. When a Fortune 500 client comes in and says, hey, we want to do AI, what happens next? How do you help them figure out what's actually worth building versus what just sounds impressive in a boardroom?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to start with the context and the problem, right? Consulting roles at Protiviti and Capgemini, there was a demand that surged for AI alongside pressure to modernize their legacy systems and reduce their technical debt. So many clients, like they wanted to do AI, but they didn't really have a great understanding of what that was, what they could realistically deliver. A lot of people had like long, unprioritized wish lists of use cases, no clear investment rationale. Like some people would be like, I want to go to investors, I just don't know how to position it. So, I mean, there was a various group of people that came in. So that's what kind of initiated this spark into creating the AI Studio and the COEs as like the bring structure early into early stage AI adoption, because this is very innovative. People are moving fast. So focusing on like education, workshops, practical framing rather than just hype. I know there's a lot of noise. So how do we do that? And you talked about the use case prioritization matrix and that really moving from vague ambition to actionable decisions. And that was the goal of these workshops. So how do we approach it? Obviously, getting the right people in the room is the start. The business and technical stakeholders, and then that moved into a lightweight prioritization matrix. So thinking of value versus complexity. What are the value drivers for the business? And then getting a good understanding of complexity to surface low risk, high impact opportunities. That's the sweet spot that we were targeting for on this matrix. And then the emphasis is you're not boiling the ocean, you're introducing some emphasis on sequencing. How do you sequence this in an effective way that builds upon the technology? And that came into the overall assessment, right? Complexity was also tied to real constraints. Again, there is no universal model. It's a good look on data quality, infrastructure, operating maturity. What do you have as your starting point? And of course, people are at different points. So really mapping that out in the front, just being able for them to see that goes a long way for some of these businesses. So again, real technical constraints, not abstract scoring, and then some prioritization matrix. The other part that I want to emphasize is really around governance. The use cases are evaluated around a governance framework, loose governance framework to start. So that gives you a more complete picture. So that gives you the whole process made more credible, tangible, and then gives the implementation team something to go off of instead of just going cold and then running an implementation model. You're really building trust with the client going through some of these exercises.
Wonderful. That's honestly quite fascinating. There's something I want to pull on bit more because it really connects to our next topic. And that's really my framework here. I love the governance piece and the trust. And you mentioned that sanity check use cases against the governance framework was critical for keeping enthusiasm from outrunning reality, something along those lines. And that phrase stacks with me. I'm a huge fan of the governance and the foundation part and an actual enabler in the AI systems design. But also, I want to refer this a little bit more to our pre-call moment where you emphasize that people are interested in building AI they can trust, and specifically talked about that governance framework that you already mentioned as well, the guardrails and appropriate controls from the beginning, not as an afterthought. And we've seen this so many times, and a little bit earlier in 2024, especially, where the governance just came as a second priority, which is, in my opinion, a huge mistake in building those processes, frameworks, and workflows. So let me ask you this. What does worthy AI actually means in practice? What does it mean? And why do you frame governance as a foundation rather than something you bolt on later?
Right. I think adding governance and risk up front really reduces your issues later. Thinking through those designs actually helps you understand where the failure modes could be, ease into implementation, and reduce rework once the systems are reach production stage. Once you understand what the common failure patterns are, people say, well, my AI isn't useful. Well, and that's often a grounding or context issue. These problems are usually structural. So you can bake that in up front, saves problems down the road, and it makes your AI more useful, impactful. Some of the foundational decisions for governance people should consider upfront, like data, how is it secured at rest, in transit, privacy and permissions, who can access the application. You don't want to later on understand that there's security holes in your application, and that part of it comes more natural up front. And then how are outbound calls being made? These are just some of the decisions you decide up front that reduce rework later. Now, the other thing is memory state management. And how is memory handled? That's a deliberate choice whether or not you want to have a stateless operating machine per session or something that retains history and learns over time. Those decisions really change the solution architecture. Thinking through all of that really builds a more robust application of system, what I'm trying to say. I'm just giving some very specific examples of how you can do that. And obviously, those are the build versus buy decisions. At the end of the day, you want to get use out of the application, and going through all the governance framework makes your application more useful in the end.
Beautiful. At the core, Helena, what I think you're describing is governance as a design thinking and not compliance theater. That's something I try to dig a little bit deeper with my guests to enforce the message. Because I personally think that this is a very practical and operational perspective, and that is going to resonate strongly with everyone that is at that intersection of design and trying to figure out how do you do your due diligence in the early stage of building AI workflows that actually matter. So let's shift gears into our core framework questions. 5 questions that I ask every guest, and they are designed to give us a consistent lens across different industries and use cases. I'm very keen to hear your perspective indeed. So let's start with the first one, the experimentation to execution. We touched a little bit on this already, but your perspective is quite unique. You've been working with Fortune 500 clients at different stages of AI maturity, and I respect that a lot given where we are today. And some are just starting to experiment. That's what I know. That's what I've seen myself as well. Others are trying to scale proven use cases. That's where the maturity kicks in and more complexity design is required. But Helena, when deploying AI or agents in production, tell us what's been the biggest hurdle in turning early experimentation into measurable success? What, in your opinion, separates the companies that successfully scale from those that get stuck in what I call pilot purgatory?
Pilot purgatory, that's a really good place of putting it. I've seen a lot of people getting stuck there. Strong prototypes, and actually the technology that built prototypes is very different from like production grade. So strong prototypes don't automatically translate to production. A lot of the reason for that is laptop open source demos. They're built with tools that are built primarily for prototyping, lightweight. They're not industrial grade. You're going to see throughput problems when you move that into a production grade. So there's actually two phases. There is the prototype phase, which kind of builds out the proof of concept, and there is the production phase, which is real traffic scale and operation. Now, that is a big shift. People don't think through that as much. So what separates teams is a clear roadmap from production, prototype to production, like defining milestones, really thinking through the technology aspect of how you move from one system to another. I've seen this a lot. You want to move to the cloud. Cloud is more production ready. How do you scale safely without disrupting the business? A lot of people are resistant to scale because it's usually about risk, not lack of interest. Now you have the potential to disrupt production grade systems. People are very nervous about that. So I think the role of the maturity assessment here is really honest review of existing tech and tools up front. Surface the constraints early. UI, for example, UI frameworks that work for demos but fail at production scale. Some UI frameworks do not have the security protocols. Make that known up front. Assuming that your technology is just going to catch up magically like mid-delivery is a no-no. I mean, it's not a no-no, but a lot of people do this, but you want to just at least have that kind of like jotted down, and you won't have that stalled momentum later as you know you're anticipating this. So that's what I think. Successful team call out the bottlenecks and they scaling risks, and they really have a clear roadmap on how they're going to transition from a prototype phase into a production ready implementation, which might require different tool sets and designs. So I think if you can think about that as much as possible up front, you're in a better position.
That makes perfect sense, Helena, and it's refreshingly honest. You bring a very important point here. A lot of vendors promise that the tech will catch up, and then everyone's disappointed 6 months. It just happens, and it's only about AI. In general, we as buyers, we have to be very, very conscious about prototypes and then demos, and then how it scales in production post initial assessment cycle. which I guess brings me to the measurement piece. You've talked about the importance of connecting technical capabilities to business outcomes. That's what we addressed a little bit earlier in our pre-call as well. And frankly, this is where a lot of AI initiatives fall apart. They build impressive tech, but can't articulate the business value. We all been there. At the end of the day, nothing new, and it's okay to experiment. But with regards to measurement, if you had to pick one metric to prove AI's value to a CFO or a board of directors, what would it be and why? And how do you help technical teams translate what they're building into business language that executives actually care about? By the way, my favorite question: what is your top AI business value metric out there?
If I had to choose one, and there's many, especially for a CFO or a board member, I would look at net operating margin or net profit
Mhm.
margin because that's really where all the impact ultimately shows up. We talk about efficiency, but that all rolls up into this net operating margin or profit margin. So reducing variable costs through automation, shortening the cycle times, improving resource efficiency. At the end of the day, it's all operating leverage. AI enables revenue growth without having your costs rise at the same time. If you can enable revenue growth and keep your costs steady or reduce them, that profit margin goes up. So that's not efficiency theater. And we've seen this already happening with some of the AI tech companies. It's already baked in. They are more profitable than they used to be. And it's not AI didn't factor into that. It definitely did. So it's what I want to say is like it has been baked in. Now, whether or not that's realistic or not, that's going to come later. But really, all the supporting KPIs all roll into this big number that you're seeing play out with the market right now. Secondary gains roll up to net profit margin and makes it the cleanest CFO friendly. And not only that, but CFO and the board to understand how these decisions are impacting their bottom line.
I love that answer because it cuts through all the noise. Everyone wants to talk about AI driven insights or enhanced productivity, which may have many meanings. But what you are saying, no, let's just look at net profit margin. It's quite sharp and it resonates highly with me because that's where it all shows up. At the end of the day, this is what it really is all about: driving real impact for the business. Proactivity is obviously a fantastic metric, but that's very difficult to quantify across scattered deployments. And I guess that net profit margin impact is not an easy metric to deliver as well. But if you can, and you can embed the process together in the initial phase, that will make those AI workflows and strategies last forever. Or you cut them off real quick if they related to that. It's all about prioritization, right? Because not every AI initiative is going to move the needle on profit margin equally. Organizations come to you with tons of AI ideas, and everyone thinks their use case is the most important. Please, Helena, walk me through, and the audience as well, what's your prioritization framework? When you have five different directors all wanting to implement AI in the departments, how do you help leadership decide which initiatives investment first? What makes one AI project more valuable or feasible than another?
Yeah, and this goes back to the previous discussion that we had about the value versus complexity framework. So really understanding, like focusing on that sweet spot, high business value, realistic technical effort. If you can help position those across all the use cases, like you said, five different directors have different ideas and they all think that it is the most impactful for their line of work. But having them see the bigger picture kind of draws it all together, like what is truly driving business value, avoid chasing some of the use cases that look exciting but aren't scalable. That's how the matrix helps the business and market value against technical complexity to really surface those quick wins and build the momentum. This really allows you to modernize and improve technical debt in parallel too. I put a lot of emphasis on that from the prioritization standpoint, just so people see that this is how we're making those decisions and then helping align everyone on the right path forward.
I guess the framework can be beautiful, simple, value versus complexity, focus on the sweet spot. I personally can see how that would immediately depoliticize a lot of conversations because you're not arguing opinions, you're looking at data. And that brings us back to governance, which we touched on earlier. But I want to go deeper here because you work with highly regulated clients, financial services, health, Fortune 20 companies that can't afford to get this wrong. How do you help them think about governance early without it becoming a blocker to innovation? What are the essential governance mechanisms that need to be in place before you scale AI? And how do you balance move fast with don't break things in those regulated environments, Helena?
Yeah, that is the tricky part of it is how do you move fast and don't break things. So having the governance framework checklist is a starting point, what you want to consider to build a safe application. I mentioned some of them earlier, but then the other thing is governance has to show up in real decision making now. It's not just about policy. From the start, that means what decisions does the system influence? Who approves it? And what are the key assumptions around risk accuracy? Understanding what those assumptions are, really like spelling that out, and then having a decision ownership framework like RACI or DACI, who does the work, who owns the outcomes. A lot of people are offloading risk onto AI agents. Well, that doesn't work. Human beings still need to be in the loop. And where does those touch points occur is actually something that can be clarified through a simple framework like a RACI. Keeping clear approval and accountability trails clear from the start, understanding who's going to be in charge of those helps align the people as well. Also, the last piece of this is really around operational governance, and that's your logging, monitoring. Those things are like non-negotiable, right? You need visibility into model inputs, outputs, human intervention points. I'm rolling this all up together and how performance changes over time, like degradation. All of these things need to be considered. And that goes into your master governance framework, right? That you spell out in the front. This is how we're going to regulate the AI as we're implementing it. These are the key decisions, the ownership stakes. It really takes something from a scientific experiment into a real operational model. And that's what a lot of places are looking for as they're nervous into moving into production. How are we going to organize around this? That makes it an industry grade application rather than just a prototype, which touches your earlier point as well.
Very practical take on governance from Helena, everyone. AC, RACI, logging, monitoring, these aren't theoretical frameworks. They are operational tools that actually work. Love the practical and but tactical approach to governance and should be, in my opinion, always considered as a plan, part of the design from day one, and apply those professional, proven project management principles into delivery of any area projects through obviously the governance lens. Not only the policy, but actually what does this mean for the entire business and the IT world around us. All right, last question in our core framework, future outlook. As you look ahead over the next 12 months, Helena, where do you see enterprise AI creating the most tangible impact? You mentioned following the trend into agentic AI with multi-agent orchestration, MCP, autogen. Expand on that for me. What transformation are you betting on yourself? Where's the real value going to come from in 2026?
Yeah, I've been following the push into agentic for a while, actually. I kind of made that bet several years back, and it's turned out in my favor. I really think it's agentic AI as well as multi-cloud solutions, like multi-cloud infrastructure. There's a lot of tools being developed for that right now. There's growing momentum. And MCP and AutoGen were very research based in the beginning. It's moving from research heavy into more industrialized and accessible applications. Platforms like Copilot Studio are really lowering the barrier to entry. It's going to enable people to build useful agents without having deep engineering expertise, where it doesn't live in the research world anymore. This real impact is actually coming from getting these tools into people's hands. You're creating participation. The person feels like they're participating in AI, not like AI is happening to them. That really is the democratization of these tools too. I feel like this is also mirroring the personal computer adoption curve that we saw previously. All of a sudden, you have these advanced systems that used to sit in industrial grade facilities. Now they're available to other people, and the barrier to entry is a lot lower. So you can see a lot more people using them. So I would like place more bets there. So that's one area, especially around how to use these tools effectively and implement them at different places. You'll probably see growing demand there. Many people can use it. Let's put together some guardrails for how to do that effectively and put together an environment for them where they can use these tools securely. There's probably going to be a growing space. The other thing is like multi-cloud expansion I touched upon. As AI becomes operational, the lock-in risk, there's a lot of competition in this space. Lock-in risk is real. People don't want to be tied to just one platform. A lot of companies had a lot of trepidation around moving to the cloud in general. If we can diversify their risk, it's just about risk diversification. Different clouds excel at different things. So multi-cloud infrastructure kind of gives you the resilience at scale. These trends reinforce each other, like you're building agentic tools that simplify making AI, and then you're running these multi-cloud strategies that give you this durable infrastructure to run your AI with. So I think that's a long-winded answer, but yeah, those are the areas that I'm following at the moment.
Love your perspective, Helena. And where I work with my business partners, that question in any workshop, in any client meeting, is very, very popular. Obviously, everyone wants to know what's happening, what's ahead of us, and we have opinions. Personally, I'm aligned. I love how you actually connected those two trends, the agentic frameworks, democratizing AI development, and multi-cloud, giving organization the flexibility to actually operationalize it at scale. And that's a really compelling thesis, to be quite honest with you, because ultimately, I believe that there is a huge opportunity for us to see a growth of platforms in the AI space, and proper software provider we already seen in 2024, 2025 heading that way. You gave us a couple of examples, Salesforce being another one, right? We are giving, at the end of the day, the real users, the end users with no coding skill sets, expertise, and ability to build an agent to solve another smaller workflow or process to drive productivity in those micro workflow engagements as well. Truly appreciate your perspective here, and the complex answer is always of value to the audience and certainly to myself as well. And that's a perfect segue into our deep dive questions. These are unique to you based on our conversation, Helena. So let's dig into this assistive versus agentic distinction a little bit more, because I think this is one of the most important frameworks for understanding where AI is actually headed. You and I talked about splitting the AI world into two categories. The assistive AI that drives efficiency, it's typically where the employee of an organization is the user, and agentic AI that drives productivity and real ROI for the business, solving real workflow process opportunities and challenges. Please unpack for us that thesis a little bit more. What's the fundamental difference, and why is 2025, 2026 the inflection point for agentic AI in enterprise?
This is a really good separation, actually, that I've given a lot of thought to more recently. The core distinction really helps people understand where the differences are. Assistive AI helps people work faster. It's things like chatbots. They help summarize, draft, answers questions. Humans are still driving every step. You're able to get rich information out of these systems very fast, which drives those efficiencies. But the workflows stay largely the same. Agentic AI is a significant shift away from that, where it can make decision and work with tools. It's acting. in addition to advising, right? In addition to assistive, it's actually doing something, and you can define tool sets that it can do this. So it starts with multiple tool steps, tools and systems can trigger actions, whether that be like calling APIs or just handing off different tasks. So it's actually going to be removing work from people's plates instead of just speeding it up. So the KPIs shift from time saved, adoption, to throughput, error rates, cost per transaction. So it's going to shift from efficiency to restructuring work. How does work get done? What are these agents going to handle? The question you asked around the inflection point, there's a couple reasons why 2026 is going to be this inflection point. That's because there's rapid progress in these systems, making them easier to use. It's going from research demos to enterprise-ready orchestration and guardrails, especially with the governance frameworks that I talked about. Platforms like Copilot Studios are lowering the barrier to entry. Like, all of that is converging at one point. So I think now is a good time because you're having cloud infrastructure that can support this, mature enough to support the prototypes that were developed previously. So you're really going to see more and more of this implementation become real at scale, I think, going forward.
Personally, you really like the KPIs mentioned. Very different business value recognition for the agentic versus assistive AI. Both of them will be obviously assisting each other, no pun intended. Assistive AI assisting agentic AI. But that is a clear articulation of the shift. And I think you're right. 2026 is when we will see this move from research and POCs into real operational deployment at scale. All the learnings from 2023, 24, 25 will start paying off, I guess, very, very soon. And that's what I want to see. I already see some of the successes with my customers in that exact space. The POCs that we conducted earlier in 2025 with clear KPIs set up as a foundation of the future scale. And that brings me to my final question. And it's a little bit more about the human side of this transformation. Because you can have the best agentic framework in the world, but if you can't get stakeholders aligned on priorities, it really doesn't matter. You said something in our pre-call again that really stuck with me. People have a lot of ideas. They need a roadmap, but you, as a practitioner, you've done those workshops with multiple director level stakeholders who all think the use case is the most important or very important, should be prioritized. Please walk me through how you get everyone on the same page. This is a little bit more practitioner from the boardroom question. Tell us, what does a good AI roadmap actually look like? And then how do you build consensus when you have competing priorities and limited resources in place?
That's a really good question because they're not lacking ideas. A lot of the time, they're lacking alignment. So that's where the roadmap help. It's really like it shifts the conversation from having individual priorities to shared outcomes, right? So as much as you can take the politics out of it, you're structuring it in stages with milestones. How does the roadmap work? It's very structured. Building off of that value versus complexity matrix that helps you position which use cases are the most impactful for the business. If you can look at it that way, it can help sequence of some of them actually they depend on each other. So building that dependency matrix. We can do this, but not first, right? Because you need to have this core of function established to build the second one. So it's the prioritization matrix set down with dependencies, but based in business objectives. We're doing this with a common goal, which would be to support. If you start the conversation globally, where are our major problems within the business, or what are we looking to accomplish overall? And then where do we see our technical debt? Where do we have those challenges? You can build off those big questions and then break it down into the different stages. So that's how you structure the roadmap so that you frame deprioritization as sequencing and not rejection, things like that. So the roadmap does become like the shared narrative. It brings like clarity, reduces politics, and helps drive alignment. But those are just some of the exercises that you can do to build a full scale roadmap, builds in the pressure points of the business as well.
Thank you, Helena. sort of brings me a little bit back to the episode 2 with Nathan Burke, a CMO of 7AI, where he described that the roadmap typically starts with his customers is with simply non-human work. What can AI do so human can focus on the real human valuable tasks first? And that could also be piece of that roadmap and framework as well. But Helena, this has been incredibly valuable. I've learned a lot. I really appreciate that. Summarizing, I think my biggest takeaway is this: successful AI adoption isn't about having the best models or the most advanced technology. It's really about rigorous validation, building governance that enables trust, aligning technical capabilities with business outcomes, and having the discipline to prioritize the right initiatives rather than chasing every shiny object. You've shown us that the AI Innovation Studio approach, validating use cases through workshops and prototypes before full deployment, establishing governance frameworks from day one, focusing on shift from assistive to agentic AI, and using prioritization frameworks to build consensus among stakeholders is a deliberate strategy for helping enterprises move from AI experimentation to measurable business impact. And for everyone listening, the lesson here is whether you are evaluating AI vendors or building your own AI strategy, the questions Helena asks during validation are the same questions you should ask. Does this solve a real business problem? Can we measure the value? Do we have the governance foundation to scale responsibly? How do we prioritize this against other initiatives? And critically, does this create real productivity gains or just efficiency theater? Helena, again, thank you for sharing the practitioner's playbook and for giving us window into how enterprises can navigate this transformation successfully. This conversation has been truly, truly refreshing.
Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate being on the show. A lot of these perspectives I've learned the hard way. There's no shortcut around trial and error. I do think we're at this intersection, like new technology, real business, and real risk. What I've seen is that companies that are the most successful aren't chasing the newest model and just willing to slow down enough, validate, prioritize, and build trust into what they're deploying. I think at the end of the day, that's what really works.
Beautiful. Again, thank you so much for being on the show with us and the audience. That's a wrap on today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow Enterprise AI Unlocked wherever you get your podcasts. Next week, we'll continue exploring how companies are moving from AI experimentation to measurable business impact. I'm Paul Brzozowski from the founding team at Olakai, and I'll see you next time. Cheers. Thank you, Helena.
Thank you.